This is Heather Oriana Petrocelli interviewing Karen Jacobs-Lona on May 5th, 2015 in Portland, Oregon, in her home. Karen, do I have your permission to record you for the Carole Pope Oral History Project?
Absolutely.
Would you please state your full name, date, and place of birth?
My full name is Karen Jacobs-Lona. My date of birth is 6/17/55, and I was born in Mulberry, Arkansas. Road trip. I came to Oregon when I was 2 weeks old. So
The first question we've been asking everybody is how they came to know Carole Pope.
I met Carole somewhere in the 70s. I'm not exactly sure when. A friend of mine had gotten out of prison and needed some help getting established in the community. And so she called Carole, and we met her in a park at Mount Tabor Park, and she gave her bus tickets and resource guides. That was before Our New Beginnings had really gotten a building or anything. That's how Carole kind of started, was by meeting women in parks.
So it was just a happen chance. You guys were walking in the park and she...
No, she called her. She called her and made arrangements to meet her in the park.
Do you have memory of how she would have known to call Carole Pope?
She did prison time. She knew that when they were in prison, they used to sit around and talk about Carole was really dissatisfied with the way prison was for women, and she felt like it was really dehumanizing and that it didn't help change women's lives. And so while she was in prison, she used to talk with the other women in the dorms and discuss what would make their lives better and what could help them be successful when they got out. And one of the things was resources. So that's how she started.
So from that moment of a more simple side of resourcing, bus tickets and such, how did your relationship develop with Carole Pope? Because clearly you knew her beyond that. So.
Right. You know, I'm kind of foggy because I was in addiction back then. So I would meet her through various people as they were getting out of prison. I was kind of a late bloomer when it came to going to jail, and so my friends would get involved with her, and then end up going to see Carole. And I don't know how we got really to know each other, where I knew her number and knew how to find her. I think through a friend of mine who got in some trouble and got sentenced to her program, and I think that was the final straw where I had her number. But that's how I really got to know about Our New Beginnings and Carole at a deeper level.
So when you said you were a late bloomer when it came to jail, what does that actually mean?
Well, a lot of my friends started going to jail and prison when they were very young. I didn't start going to jail until I was almost 30. So that's pretty late. I started using drugs at 10, and I was shooting dope by 14. So to not go to prison or not go to jail until you're later on, late 20s it's atypical.
Is it something that you and Carole ever talked about? Because she would have been a late bloomer too, because I think she first went to prison at 32.
I don't know that we ever talked about it. I don't think so.
Yeah,
I don't think so.
So when you got to the point where you had her number, could call her, did she actually help you transition out at any point?
Well, so here's how it went. I went to jail, and I called her hysterical and said, "Carole, I need help. Will you get me out of jail?" And she said, "What are you willing to do?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Are you willing to go to residential treatment?" I said, "The only treatment I want is methadone." And she hung up on me. And when you're in jail and your ace in the hole just hangs up on you, you're devastated. And so I just, I couldn't believe it. So I had to wait a few days. It seemed like weeks, but I think it was probably only a few days when I called her back. And at that point I said, I'll agree to whatever it takes. And she got me out of jail.
That wait time from her hanging up to... what I'm curious about is, it had to have been, like you said, a devastating moment when your ace in the hole hangs up on you. Mm-hmm. Did you spend that time thinking about why she hung up on you, or were you spending that time being like angry at her? I
actually spent that time trying to figure out what she wanted to hear so she would get me out of jail, if truth be told. I wasn't exactly really ready quite yet, but yeah. I was like, oh my God, I really blew it. She was my way out. What can I do to, what does she want to hear from me? And so, but I had another county hold, so she agreed to, but I had to go to another county prior to coming to her.
And so when you came to her, was it Our New Beginnings established?
It was.
Was it?
It was up in Northwest Portland.
The Hoyt, 1814 Hoyt?
Uh-huh. So
what were your first impressions at that juncture of like re-getting to know Carole? Like what were your first impressions of Carole?
She would always kind of let you know the seriousness of your situation. She didn't joke around. She was not a warm fuzzy type when she first met you or anything like that. So you would come in and she had this big purple chair. It was purple velvet because purple was her favorite color. And she would say, if you tried to sit in any other chair, she'd say, no, this one. And you would sit in this chair. And when I came to Carole, I didn't go inpatient. You could either live at the house or you could access her services on an outpatient basis and live elsewhere. And so I was on an outpatient basis because I still had pending charges in a couple counties. And so I came in and she sat me down in the purple chair and kind of, would give the scared straight talk to you. It was not about motivational interviewing or how can I support you and be loving and stuff. It was like, you're in for it and don't fuck around and listen, bitch, you better. I mean, it was cut and dry. This is the way it was going to be. And she would get more warm and friendly during the process, but it didn't start out that way. It was kind of a scared straight kind of situation.
Do you have memories of how you felt sitting in that purple chair?
Little. I pointed to a picture that a friend of mine did that was that she calls a chair where you're seen and not heard. And yeah, you felt really little because it was a big armchair, like a winged armchair, and probably bigger than this one, or it seemed bigger. Of course, I was smaller, so both of those could play a factor. But yeah, it was scary.
And so after the moment of doing the time in the armchair, what you're a outpatient for Our New Beginnings, how would you characterize the help that you actually did receive from Our New Beginnings?
It was amazing. Well, they made me. I had to come in every day before noon and check in physically. So, because they wanted to see me and make sure I wasn't loaded, which I was drinking, and so sometimes I'd come in a little drunk, and it took a while for them to catch up with me, but it did, and like maybe a month or two. But I would come in every day. I had a case manager. She was very sweet. And also they assigned me to a mental health worker. Everybody got a mental health worker. Also, they hooked up with TASC, which was Tactical Alternatives to Street Crimes. It was a treatment program that's no longer available. Outpatient was a good program. And I had to go there. Also, I had to do Council of Prostitution Alternatives. So Carole had groups for Council of Prostitution Alternatives right there in the building. And when I was there was in 87, and that was a time when all the Malala murders were happening, and two of the women I was in group with that were Carole's clients were victims of him. So they sat in a group, and I think that kind of helped me get past drinking alcohol and get more serious about getting clean. So yeah.
How much longer after? So that was 87. How much longer after was like your clean date?
87. I got clean in 87. Yeah, I'm talking like a month or two that I drank, and like I would drink. there's a park right across from New Beginnings, and I would down a 40-ouncer of Old English and then walk over to group. It wasn't like I was trying to be discreet or drinking vodka because it didn't smell or anything. I was drinking Old English and reeked of it, and yeah.
Did they ever call you on it?
Oh, yeah. I got the purple chair again. And this time Carole said, you got a fucking choice. You can either go to prison, you can go to Alpha House, or you can go to 12-step meetings. I know, I didn't take a rocket scientist, so I went for the 12-step meetings. So, and it worked for me, so.
Were those 12-step meetings, were they facilitated in our New Beginnings, or was it out?
No. But the meetings that started there, I was the one that started those meetings, the relapse prevention group. I was the one that Carole wanted to get relapse prevention. I was the counselor that ran those. That was later.
Okay, let's go. So,
okay.
All right, so you have your clean and sober date in 1987.
Mm-hmm.
Is there when you do reach that marker in our New Beginnings, was there any kind of celebration? Was there any?
There wasn't for my clean day, although Carole did acknowledge time if you'd tell her. There was a lot of women around, so she wouldn't remember everybody, but I want to say her sobriety birthday was close to mine. Our birthdays are like a day apart, and I want to say our clean dates were really close too. Mine is at the end of March, and I think hers was in April. I'm not positive on that, but I'm pretty sure. And they were really close together, and so she kind of remembered mine more than she'd remember other people's because it was really close to hers. So yeah, she would acknowledge stuff. The biggest one, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, was when I had 5 years clean. She got me this awesome. It was a pyramid that had a medallion in it, a 5-year medallion in the center of it. It was like plastic, and it was floating in the center. It was beautiful, which I kept it for years. And then when my son got sober, now he has it. So when he got 5 years sober, he got it from one of the women I sponsored. So yeah.
The reason I was asking is that earlier you showed me a tassel, but now I'm realizing
that's for graduating. This is for let me see.
I realized the date was the same. That's why I had asked.
Yeah, no, this is for graduating our New Beginnings.
Okay.
So after, I think I was with their program, I want to say about 9 months. And then she'd have a graduation ceremony. It was a huge deal. And it was up at the Northwest Service Center. And she had dignitaries there. Gladys McCoy gave me this. And so, oh God, that makes me want to cry. But it was a big deal. You got to have your families there, and I didn't see that one coming. For people like me that, although I graduated high school, I was always off. I had graduated in alternative school, and so I never went to any ceremony or anything. That seemed really lame to me. And so this was the first time I had anything like that with my family, and it was pretty cool. So,
oh my God, it's
it was big. Carole understood ceremony so much, and what a huge part it played in healing. And I think that's why she made such a big deal over holidays. I don't know if anybody's talked to you about her thing in the holidays. I mean, she would go totally nuts over every holiday. Easter, Christmas were the two biggest ones, but I mean everything, 4th of July. And she'd find stuff always in purple, and she would have these incredible parties and make sure that everybody got gifts, and because a lot of the people that went there didn't really have happy memories of the holidays. So she really wanted to create that for people. It was the family that they never really had. So
would you consider that foundational to her, like, for lack of better terms, her methodology for healing, giving a basis of stability and family?
I think, yes. I mean, and we'll get to this in a minute, but I'd like to talk, when we talk about when she hired me to work there. But I think that her creating a sense of family, and nowadays they would say Carole had horrific boundaries. She did have boundaries. There's no getting around it. when you worked for her, you were encouraged to give your home phone number to your clients because she wanted them to be able to get a hold of you 24/7. And the expectation was if they called you on Sunday at 4 o'clock in the morning, you'd answer that phone. And that would never fly nowadays. It would be considered unethical, but it was a really effective practice, and it worked really well with people, and it made them feel like you really cared. So, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll come back to that when we get to your work in there.
Absolutely.
Before we move on to when you became a leadership role at Our New Beginnings, I just had a couple questions. Did you stay a non-resident outpatient the entire time when you were...
Yes.
And, oh, go ahead.
No. Yes, I did. The only switch was Carole rented me an apartment. She rented me my first apartment, clean and sober. Actually, the first one she rented me, I was just getting clean and sober. Because I remember detoxing in this apartment, and it was right up the street from her program. But I negotiated with all the utilities to work with me on payment plans, but the gas company was really resistant to that. They would not work on a payment plan, and they would not turn on my gas. And in '87 was a silver thaw. I mean, it was really cold, and so I had no heat. And so she had to move me out of that apartment, move somebody in that could get gas in their name. She moved me into another apartment and paid for that for me that had steam heat, so I didn't have that issue. So, yeah.
Was that a service she provided for
a lot of women? She knew, Carole, nowadays we would call it responsivity issues. Carole knew how to address responsivity issues and dynamic risk factors for women, like housing. She knew about drugs and alcohol, mental health, getting them stable on meds, getting them jobs. She knew the importance of that stuff to stabilize somebody's life patterns so that they could get a grip.
For the resident population, was it something as a non-resident, was there a mingling? Like, did they...
Oh, heck yes. I came to all the I used to come to the house for all the parties, and every now and then they would have something like a special meal or something. Like, I can remember fried chicken. I knew who was working there, so since I lived in Northwest Portland, I would like go there when it was like really good food. When so-and-so was the house mom for that night, you knew that the food was going to be better than maybe somebody else didn't cook quite as well. And you just knew when it was going to be a barbecue or something like that. Yeah, so you definitely, and the groups, the prostitution alternative groups, they would be a mix of people that were living in residence and people that were considered outpatient.
So the groups would have mixes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any memories of how you characterize life as a resident in? Is there anything that you have like a takeaway? Did you ever feel like you wish you were in the home?
I really felt like I had it pretty good not being in the home, just because I had a lot of freedom and I had a lot of space, and the idea of living with all those women and the children, she had kids in that house, and they were not well-contained, well-mannered children. These were screaming, tantrum throwing. I mean, some of them, not all of them, but yeah, it could be a nightmare.
So you had like the best.
Yeah, so it was. Yeah, I did. I could leave when it got crazy there.
Do you have memories of the physicality of the Northwest Hoyt House? Can you describe some of the things that you remember?
God, yes. I remember the whole layout. I drive by it, and I still get the feeling of it when I walk by that house. But just you would walk in the door, and to the right was the offices. And then you would go in the one room that probably was the living room initially, and then you go into the dining room, and then it was Carole's office was the next room, and then the UA room, and then she had her own UA machine. So if if she was thinking you were doing something. And it was the first time I ever knew about peeing in a hat, that we had to pee into hats. You pee into a hat so they measure your urine, so they know that you're not cheating on your urinalysis. And sometimes I would have to pee like this, because sometimes you could rig stuff for urine, and so if you pee like this, you don't have your hands free to... So, but yeah. But I got clean pretty quick, so I didn't have to go through that much. Yeah, I was scared not to.
So you said it was about 9 months to graduation. To
when I completed our New Beginnings, yeah. And I would say I probably was drunk the first 3 months I was there, and then I got clean and sober.
And this is like for completing the program, is it a track that many people are on at the same time, or is everyone's track an individualized track?
Everybody's track was individualized, but the ceremony, everybody that had completed would get recognized and honored at that thing, and give an opportunity to get up and speak and talk about. Because when you'd go up and get your tassel, you had an opportunity at the microphone to talk a little bit about New Beginnings and Carole. So,
do you have any memory of what you would have said or did say?
I know it was really emotionally charged for me. I don't remember specifically what I said, but I do know that I felt like she saved my life, and I still do. And having two people out of my group strangled in a short time frame was kind of an indicator of that like, this is for real. This is, what you're playing with is life and death. So
for that task, I forget the exact name of it, but for the Alternatives to Prostitution Task Force,
there's two different programs.
Oh,
Task dealt with the alcohol and drug. Prostitution for our Council for CPA, prostitution. I don't even remember what Prostitution Alternatives. Council for Prostitution Alternatives. That was to get people. They were kind of in competition with Carole, so there was because back then funding pools for women was so limited that you would all be bidding for the same money. It would sometimes pit really good programs against each other. So CPA and Carole sometimes got pitted against each other because Carole wanted to get the money for having her girls do groups there, and they wanted to get them to come over to CPA. So it was kind of, yeah.
My last question before we move on to you being hired is, was there a bond in the sense of, like, for the classmates you graduated with, did you ever keep in touch with any of them? Was there a particular bond with graduating with that group?
There was some, but not, there weren't very many that went, a lot of them moved, like they didn't stay in the Portland area. Some of them, I got more bonded. I'm still connected with some of the women that were my clients there, and some of the women I worked with. So they maybe were a little ahead of me or a little behind me. Because I was not in the residence, it was really hard to, who came first? I don't know. I didn't think of things like that. So most of the people I got close to were the former residents and residents that came after me for whatever reason. There were a few, the ones I tended to like that were at the same time as me were up to no good. So they're the ones that really attracted to me. So I started like hanging out with ones that came a little before me because they were a little more stable. And that worked for me. And I think that most of the women that were really successful did that also. They tended to generate over to more mentor type, watching other people and see how they did it and stuff.
So how did you wind up becoming employed at Our New Beginnings?
Okay, so my mental health counselor was named Gray Wolf, and she was awesome. And I kept in contact with her, and she called me. I was working for quadriplegics, and I was also working in a restaurant, or had been working in restaurants. But she called me and said, Carole needs somebody to do a relapse prevention group and introduce recovery into the house. We think you'd be really good at it. I think you'd be really good at it. Will you come up and interview? And I said, no. Heaven, and I didn't say heavens. I said, hell no. People that try to help people are just people that are untreated codependents. And I had worked too hard to take care of myself, and I had enough problems. I didn't want anybody to deal with anybody else's problems. And she said, well, I really think you'd be good at it. And I said, well, I'll think about it, Gray. And she said, okay. And then Gray called me back the next day and said, you have an appointment the next day. I said, I never see it. She said, you got an appointment with Carole if you want to miss it. And I said, no, I'll go. So I went up there, and so Carole was so nice to me and said, I really want you here, and I think it'd be really good. And I was so excited that I was going to do it. I didn't even ask her what I was going to make. I said, okay, I agreed to it, to do this group once a week up at her house. And I mean, I had to come in after the fact, after it started, and say, Carole, what am I making for this? So, and I don't even remember what it was, but I just was really excited. So that's how I got in the field of what I do now today.
So you've started with doing a once a week group. Can you talk about did you have training, or was it like... No. It was
coming in and doing a drug group about what was working for me, passing out what I did. It was probably in violation of all sorts of programs and stuff like that. It was probably loosely around, I had a couple years clean, around 12 steps. So we would like talk about recovery and what I was doing to stay clean and what they were doing to stay clean and who was supportive, and we just kind of identify what was support. And it was really loosey-goosey, but I liked it, and the women seemed to like it. It was okay. So that's how I started. And then Carole was going to start a program across the street, and it was a moms and babies program. And she asked me to come be a house mom at the moms and babies program when she opened that. So I went over and did that. So that was my first full-time job with Carole, was going over there. And it was a great job. It was a great house. It was moms and their kids. There were it was very few moms, like maybe 4 or 5 moms in the house and their kids, depending on how many kids were in the house. And I would go to work at I want to say after dinner, like 6 or 7. Yeah, it was 7 to 7. And so I would go there at 7, and I would check their chores. We'd hang out, watch TV. I'd play with the kids, and then I could go to sleep. I had my own little bedroom there, and I could sleep, and then I would wake up and get everybody who woke up in the house and started on breakfast and morning chores, and then I would go. And what was really fun was after a while, I would walk into work, and sometimes there were 2 little toddlers in the house when I was there, and they would race for me and say, I want a one-on-one. I want to tell you what she did. And they would be like tattling on each other, and so I'd have to go mediate toddler traumas, and it was really fun. It was a great job. But she got some funding for that, but it got messed up. The funding for that and the funding for the big house got messed up. So it wasn't in existence a really long time. I want to say maybe a year, 9 months, a year. And then it went belly up. And so then she brought me over as a case manager into the main house. And that's where she could look right at her office and see exactly what I was doing. So, and that's when and then I became a case manager at Our New Beginnings.
So first for the Moms and Babies program,
Mm-hmm.
was it physically across the street from Irony Beginning?
Physically across the street. It was a kind of an interesting Barney house, and it was in the basement. We had the basement, but it was really nice. It had natural wood. It was, I want to say, open beam ceilings. It was pretty amazing place. It had a big room, had a kitchen. 1, 2, 3. I want to say only 4 bedrooms, other than the room that the staff went in. It was not huge, and I think that was part of the problem, is that it didn't accommodate enough moms.
So with that, for adult capacity, if you have 4 rooms, what was that?
There was one woman in each room. She did not double up on the Moms and Babies program.
Do you know what was the impetus for starting the Moms and Babies program?
Carole, the one thing about Carole is she always wanted to catch the people that slipped through the cracks in the system, which was one of her greatest strengths. Carole bending the rules was really one of her greatest strengths. And so she would, if somebody showed up at her doorstep crying, they were likely going to have a place to sleep that night. And so they weren't always the women that she was funded to serve. So, I think she had Carole was really good at writing grants, and Carole was really good at getting funding sources. I think Fred Meyers bought the house for her. And she, which I've heard Fred Meyers is not easy to get money out of. And she just would get these women in that she would work them in, and really they weren't getting funding, so it would kind of be a robbing Peter to pay Paul. But one of the things that she was a real sucker for was when somebody would come there pregnant and really messed up, and or doing prostitution. Carole had she had a passion for helping prostitutes and women that were out there in really vulnerable situations. And she also, coupled with, she had a baseball bat in her office. So when pimps would come, because sometimes when you have a house that has a lot of former prostitutes in it, not everybody in the house was a former prostitute, but there was a large number. You'd end up with pimps outside your house, and she would just go out with her baseball bat and say, "Look, motherfucker," and start swinging her bat, and they were terrified of her. And so she got rid of the pimp problem pretty quick. It didn't last real long. She never hurt anybody or anything. She didn't have to. She just was really scary. And an angry Carole with a bat was pretty terrifying. So she got rid of the pimps pretty easy. So, but so she was susceptible to. Carole was guided by her emotions. So if you came in, she would help you. I'll give you an example. I had a family member who got in some trouble, who had never been in trouble in her life and was in jail. And so I went in crying in Carole's office and gave her the whole story, like, oh my God, la la la, she'd never been in trouble and everything. And Carole just looked at me and said, "What the fuck you want me to do about it?" And I said, "I want you to get her the fuck out." And she made a call, and 2 hours later, my cousin was released to me. And she had to do Art Beginnings. And she wasn't on my caseload, but she was recog to me.
Was it effective for her?
Yeah. She slipped years later, but she got back up on her feet. But she stayed clean 12 or 13 years, and then slipped, and then got clean again. She didn't slip for a long time, but she never got in trouble with the law again. So,
do you have any idea what she did, Carole,
to get her out? I don't know if she called the judge. I don't know if she called recog. We were a jail alternative back then. We were designated a jail alternative, so we had the capacity to be viewed as custody units. So I don't know what she did, but she made it happen.
That made her residential?
She wasn't residential.
Huh?
She got her out, just recog to me, and with the commitment that she would make sure she'd show up for court dates and stuff. And she got her out.
Is your story I know I can only ask from your perspective, but is your story an anomaly, or would she go for that lengths for any woman?
Everyone. everyone. That was, she did have her favorites, so I'm going to tell you right now, she did have her favorites, and I never felt like I was one, but I think I might have been. In retrospect, I think I might have been, and I think it was because I would go toe-to-toe with her. We would have screaming matches, and it's kind of bad because it kind of set me, what I learned from Carole a lot was that if you believe in something and you feel passionate about it, to fight for it and not let go of it. So sometimes I'm like a dog with a bone. If I think something's right, I'm going to fight for it. And that hasn't really served me well in my career. Like, I will never be a manager. I will never be proper and like say everything that's expected and wanted to be. I will always be the one in the room that says what everybody else is thinking and nobody wants to say out loud. But I'm glad about that. I don't want to short sell my integrity, and so and I think she gave me that. I think she fought for what she believed in. She would. We used to line up. She would call judges on the phone, or judges would call her, and the judges loved her, and she talked to them horrible. And I used to think, oh my God, who's she talking to? And they go, Judge so and so. And but I remember this one time she was talking to this judge. She goes, "What the fuck, Rambo? I ain't no fucking Band-Aid. What the fuck do you want from me?" And I'm like, oh my God, because she wanted them to give her enough that she could actually make a difference with people. And sometimes they would just want to stick somebody there to get them out of sight. And she wanted more than that. She wanted them to be successful.
So I'm curious. You started your career with at our New Beginnings.
I did.
And you're still doing. Could you kind of give me a trajectory of your career?
Oh yeah. Well, okay. So our New Beginnings. So I worked at our New Beginnings, and then financial matters got worse. And as financial matters got worse, it got to a point in our New Beginnings where we all were fighting to who would get paid first, and whoever got paid first would run to the bank, Carole's bank downtown. And because the first 2 or 3 checks in would be okay, and the ones after that would bounce. And she didn't pay my Social Security one year either. So it was a bad year, and it was financial stuff. And Carole, I remember Carole coming to me and said, I need to know you're going to ride this out. And I said, Carole, I love you, and this means a lot to me, but here's the thing, I've got my kids, and I can't go down with the ship. I've got to support my children, because when I came to Carole, my parental rights had been, I had a guardian for my kids, my parental rights, I lost my parental rights, but while I was working at Carole Pope's, they reopened a case on me. I petitioned the court and got custody of my kids when I had 4 years clean. And so they came back to me, and then I ended up raising them. And because Carole really believed in reuniting families. She loved the kids, and the kids loved her, Nana. They all called her Nana. And that was her family. So, yeah. So I went from that job, and I went to Project Network. Project Network at that time was overseen by Emmanuel Hospital, and it was an African American women's treatment program, and to deal with pregnant and postpartum women, but their targeted was African Americans. It was started by Emmanuel Hospital in response to all the crack babies that were born back in the 80s, and so they wanted to figure out a way to address that within the community. And so I went there to apply for a job for driving women around to meetings and stuff like that, and being kind of, just doing that stuff. And they told me that they thought I was overqualified, which, I don't have a lot of letters after my name. I tell people all the time I have an HSD, high school diploma, and I said, I don't have any qualifications. They wanted me to come back and apply as a counselor. They said that they didn't have any white counselors. And they said they really wanted they were looking for something really specific with the women. with the white woman that they were going to hire, and they thought that I had what it took on the inside, and that they were willing to give me the clinical training and so they wrote a variance and hired me. And so I was the first white counselor at Project Network. And I did that for 2.5 years, and then I applied for Multnomah County. And the first time I applied, they wouldn't give it to me. It was a job in the jail, working as a counselor in the jail. And the second time I applied, I made it to background, and they kept telling me they couldn't hire a felon. And I kept telling them, it's not going to go anywhere. I'm not getting my record expunged. So I don't know what you want to do about it. But I'm a felon. And they said, well, we really like you. Anyway, they hired me. So I've worked for Multnomah County for the last 20 plus years. And about half of that, about 9 of it was in the jail as a counselor there. I worked at a program called the In-Jail Intervention Program that did pre-treatment to get people ready to go be successful in treatment. And then I worked at work release, and I worked at closed street supervision. And then I got demoted because of cuts in the budget. And then Department of Community Justice, Parole and Probation, opened a secure residential treatment. And while I was there, I got certified for alcohol and drug treatment. So I got a CADC too. So they opened up a program, Community Justice did, for secure residential treatment center for men. It was called River Rock. And I got hired to work there. And so I went from the sheriff's office over to Community Justice. And then that was open for, I don't know, a couple of years. And it was really expensive. Programs at work are expensive. And it got closed down, and I went to Day Reporting Center, and that's where I work currently. I work at the Day Reporting Center, which is when people are not doing well on supervision, they refer them to us. The POs refer them to us, and so they get a counselor, and we try to remove barriers and address criminality. We provide groups. We try to help them get housing, mental health meds, treatment. We do stabilize, assess, and refer, basically. But that's changing somewhat now. The job description's changing, but that's what I do now.
What's the name of it one more time?
Day Reporting Center.
Day Reporting Center.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, based on this long purview in this field, going back to the beginning of your career at Our New Beginnings, where, for lack of better terms, the boundaries were loose, to what you do and have done for like about 25 years after. What, not just to put it up as an opposition of which is better, but do you see, like, how effective did you find the Our New Beginnings? Not just your story, but working as a case manager, how effective did you find those methods?
It was incredibly effective. I mean, there are so many people. I still am in contact with people that I knew from Our New Beginnings. And on Facebook, Facebook, now you can be in contact with everybody, and unless they're dead, which there's a lot of that. But I think that Carole's ways were she was so ahead of her time. You know, my history was that my father was a judge. He was a Portland police officer, and then he was a deputy district attorney in Clackamas County, and then he became the DA, or deputy district attorney in Pendleton in Umatilla County, and then he became the DA in Pendleton for many years, and then he was a judge. And one of the things that he was tough. He was fair, but he was tough. But what I saw with him is he would come, and he came to my graduation at Our New Beginnings. He also would he came and saw it, and he would call me about some of his cases, like, what resources do you have down there? Because sometimes smaller counties used to send people to Portland to get help because there weren't a lot of resources in other counties. So her way worked. They said that Carole used to say she had about an 80 to 85% success rate, and there was a lot of successes. In fact, I'd like to give you names at the end of this of people that I just thought of somebody that would be a really good interview. But there are people here that have lives and a lot of the people she helped have helped a lot of people too. I know you've already interviewed Lori. Lori has helped a lot of people, and I don't know if you interviewed Linda, but you should. And I'll tell you about her. Write these names down: Linda and Leah. So just to trigger my brain for later. But Carole had a way of making you want to do better. You wanted to please her. You wanted to do better. And she was really devastated when she lost New Beginnings. I mean, one of Carole's downfalls, I believe, is that she had a lot of health issues, and she didn't... she really needed to delegate. She had a really good staff, and she didn't delegate well. She would try to do it all herself, and it was just too much. And she just couldn't let go. She couldn't let other people do stuff. And I think that probably was one of her biggest undoings. If she would have trusted some people to take care of things and make things keep going and keep doing fundraising and stuff, but she wanted her, it was her baby. She birthed that in prison, and she couldn't let go of it, and I think that's unfortunate. And she was bitter. She was bitter about our New Beginnings closing. She was mad. She was mad at me for years that I did not stay until the bitter end. I mean, I'd still go over to her house, because that's one thing about Carole's house. I don't know if we talked about this, but the houseboat is, we'd all go over there and go swimming, and she'd have barbecues there. And I'm talking about when you were a client and when you were a staff. She would have these parties there, and it was really fun. And so I knew where she lived. So I would, and it was right over in Selwood. So I'd go right over the bridge and go down and see her, and she'd, what do you want? But she'd let me in, and I knew if she really didn't want to talk to me, she wouldn't let me in. But I would ask her, don't you see what a ripple you created? How many people's lives you touched that are touching so many people's lives, that's because of you. Fuck that. They stole our New Beginnings, So I think there was a part of her that was really happy about it, but there was a part of her that was still really bitter. I used to see her, the last time I saw her was alive was when she was living up in Southwest Portland, and I was working at River Rock, which was up on 12th and Main, and there was this bar, and she used to go in there for breakfast a lot. It was right down the street from her. She liked the steak and eggs in there. And so I would run into her in there, and she was very nice to me when I'd see her in there. And she'd talk about, she was doing stuff with Penny Harrington. I don't know if you remember Penny Harrington, but she was doing stuff, developing women's programs for female POs or female officers down wherever Penny was. And so we would talk, and she was always looking to do other stuff, and I don't know. She was pretty amazing. Nowadays, I think that the field has shifted. It's kind of hard for me because I work for criminal justice, and I'll say, but that won't work. This will work, and they say, oh, you have studies that indicate, and I'm like, I really want to get up and stand up and say, I'm a felon who made it out of the system. I know what works, but it's very hard to fight that battle sometimes. And right now, the way criminal justice has gone is evidence-based practices, which I agree with evidence-based practices. But one of the problems with Carole's approach is it's really hard to get empirical data that supports relational models. And I believe for people with trauma and people, minorities, relational model is crucial. And women, and but it's only as good as you are. So you could say relational model doesn't work because so and so over here couldn't establish a relationship, but they don't ever look at, well, this person was an asshole, that's why it didn't work. Not that the model didn't work. The model was fine. The person was a jerk. And so so there's a trend. Now the good part is, I guess, the good part of where community corrections is nowadays is some of the stuff is they're kind of recycling back to, they have something called McJerk that is kind of similar to giving supportive wraparound services when somebody gets out, getting them out of jail and trying to help them get jobs and treatment and housing and stuff. But the bad part is my job as a counselor, they've kind of, the emphasis now is on dealing with the criminal thought process. Like, that's where what you need to spend your energy. And if you're not doing that, you're not making a difference. You're not a good counselor. And I said, you know, when somebody's chin is on their chest, it's really hard to do work on their cognitive impairment if they're not if they're not awake. It's so there's been a trend to just deal with the criminality component, because evidence says if you don't, and I totally agree that you can't take antisocial behaviors away from somebody and not give them pro-social behaviors. You've got to give them something to replace it, otherwise they feel empty. You've got to give them something better that works better, or they won't stick with it. But I think first things first. I think Carole's way of getting somebody an apartment, getting somebody a mental health counselor, getting somebody on meds, making somebody go to therapy, getting them treatment, those are what you call responsivity issues and the dynamic risk factors, and really the emphasis and jobs. We had people that used to call us at our new beginnings and say, like a laundromat would call it, or a cleaner, dry cleaners would call us and say, we got 3 positions, send 3 people down, or the rag factory, or the junk mail people. They would call us and tell us when there were jobs available, and we would send people down, and people got jobs, and people were working. She kept people really busy. She did not believe in not keeping people busy. But I think they kind of miss it. Although I think that you have to address the criminality, I don't think that that's the first focus. I think that if you don't let people know that you care, you always knew Carole cared. You always knew. And I subscribe to the theory that if I don't think that you care, I don't care what you know. You know, if I don't know that about you, then I don't give a shit. You can tell me, you can talk all day long about all this theory and stuff over here. It's not gonna hold water. So we'll see. It'll come around full circle again, I
think. Yeah, I think your career has a very interesting purview. Same way Lori's has, where you have this there's this level of professionalization in your industry that's happened where I don't think that, kind of like you said, even maybe legally you couldn't get away with some of the things.
No, I'd lose my license.
But it seems that there was a lot of effectiveness in. So I guess my question is, like, for the Hughes and the Loris, and probably maybe depending on what Linda and Lee are doing, like the people who had that core mentorship and development under Carole Pope, what are the things that you would say that you carry into your work that you can carry in without being able to carry the way she did everything that was kind of boundary blurred?
Well, one of the things that I think I get an advantage of because I'm in recovery, so one of the things that I have worked with people on jobs that have been my former clients. You know, I've been clean 28 years. I've run into people. I've gone to parties. I don't leave a party because a former client comes in. If they've got 15 years clean and they're running a program somewhere, What am I going to do? Sorry, you're still not good enough. You're a former client. It gives a really bad message. So at some point, so what I do is if I have a potential boundary, I just report it to my work. I just write it up and say, look, I used to sponsor this woman. She relapsed. She's here now. I'll stay away from her while she's in the system, but just to let you know, there's a dual relationship. So that's the best I can do. But it doesn't keep me from having... so I guess what Carole taught me is that you don't get too good to have relationships with people that, it's, people are people. And so I try to respect professional boundaries. I'm pretty good at it. But... like I don't Facebook friends with people, but then again, there are people like Lori. I guess she was never my client. We worked together. We worked together at the same time. But there are people. I'm trying to think of somebody. Linda, like Linda, if she agreed to see you, she's probably been clean. I don't know, 20 years or something. But I took her to her first meeting when I worked at Our New Beginnings. So, I mean, what do you do? At what point do you think that that's kind of ludicrous? So,
from your time at Our New Beginnings to like what you're doing currently today, are there certain moments where you see, where you know the effectiveness of some of the things that happened at Our New Beginnings, but you can't implement them because of the way the structure is and the professionalization has happened today? Where you kind of, to mimic Carole Pope, want to like hit your wrists on the table out of like frustration because something could be effective but it can't be implemented, or is that...
You can't do anything you used to be able to do. I mean, you can't mandate people to go to 12-step meetings anymore, for one thing. You can say go to a support group, but whether they choose to go to Smart Recovery or AA or NA or church or wherever they want to go, you can't. She was very specific about, and I'm avoiding what specific things she told me to, but she was very specific about, I want you to go to this. Back then you could do that. I mean, I think between Carole and Dorothy Baker, I don't know if you guys know about Dorothy Baker. Dorothy Baker started the DISP program in Portland, the alcohol for repeat alcohol drivers, and she was just as crazy as Carole, and they were really close, and they would also get in screaming matches, so you'd sit in her courtroom and you'd hear them back screaming at the top of each other's at lungs, and then they'd come out and they'd act like nothing had happened, but everybody in the courtroom heard what they were saying. And she would demand people go to specific things, and you go to AA, you go to NA, and she would walk out, Dorothy Baker would walk out into the courtroom and go to the family and go, and you're part of the fucking problem. Judge, I think she got asked to step down. But she would go out to the family and say, you're not helping anything. You let him just keep coming back home whenever he fucks up, and stuff. And like Carole and her were like peas in a pod. And they did a lot, to change people, because people didn't want to let them down, and they were scared to let them down too. But with Carole, it was really about that that she was like kind of like a mom. She would have bristled at that, but she was kind of like all of her moms. She parented us in a kind of gruff, loving way. She would do nice things for us, but she would also hold us accountable. So yeah, I guess I'm a little bit luckier in that, because I'm in recovery, people see me at meetings. I go to meetings still with 28 years clean. So I don't go to a lot of meetings where my clients are going to be. I know where they go and where they don't go. But sometimes I'll go to a sobriety birthday or something, and my clients go, oh my God, you do go to meetings. And I go, I told you, if you go to enough, you'll see me. So, yeah. So I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I think there is something to be said, but there's also a burnout factor that goes for the care provider. And there's also a danger, because for everybody that felt close, there was always, like when, I'll give you an example. When Carole would do the holiday things, she would get these incredible gifts sometimes for people. And sometimes certain people got better gifts than other people. And some people felt really left out. And so there's always a flip side to that coin. You know, there's always the like, oh, this is so wonderful. And this is like, yeah, but I got fucked. Which is probably part of the reason there are professional boundaries. So.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned it. I was curious about, you basically said the physical toll and the emotional toll it took on her. Uh-huh. While you were still a case manager and things were, and employees were running to the bank, which means things aren't going great financially.
Right.
When you're in that moment, did you believe that Arga New Beginnings could function exactly with its parameters without Carole at the helm? Could it have still accomplished, in your opinion, what it was trying to accomplish without that cult of personality at the head?
I think she needed to be there. I'm not sure she needed. I think we could have, if she would have let us help, she could have made it. I think as much as Carole didn't want to admit it, I think she made a choice to close it down. I think there were things that she did that put that situation in place. So, I think it could have gone on. I think it could have survived her death had she done it right. But she would have always been the figurehead. There would have always been her presence. There always needed to be Carole Pope's presence, I think. Because she's what brought us together. She was the one common denominator that we all had that made us all want to come together and do something. So, yeah.
Even in the moment when you're there with her, did it take any hindsight to look back and know how you felt about Carole, or did you feel it in the moment?
Oh no, I knew I loved her. Scared of her, but that was only when I was screwing up. I wasn't scared of her when I wasn't screwing up.
It was like a tough love scare.
Yeah, a tough love scare. But the other part is she would let you go to it. I never got fired. I would have how many jobs can you have where you have screaming matches with your fuck you, I'm not doing it, and you don't get fired. You know, you just slam doors and then you get through it, and then you do what you got to do, and then you talk it over and you get to some sort of resolution. But we did have a few screaming matches, so not a lot, but yeah.
Delegation wasn't a strong point of hers?
No. I think probably, I think like Lori went to school to be the administrative assistant, and she was presented with what her job was going to look like, and it really didn't ever materialize in the way she had hoped for, I think. I think she felt underutilized. And then there was another person, Mac, who was like Carole's right-hand man. I mean, speaking of that, did you know Carole had one male client? Yeah. Mitch. Crazy Mitch. He was crazy, and he had heard about her program being a jail alternative, and he came down there, and he talked her into letting him do his community service there. So, and he was very proud that he was the one male client she ever had. And he just did work outside that place, but yeah. Bet you didn't know that either. Mitch. Yep. He died a couple years ago. He stayed clean for 15 years or something, so she even had an impact on old Mitch. And he was crazy. So.
You had mentioned that you had regained custody of your children?
Yes.
Was Carole instrumental, or Our New Beginnings part? Were they
part
of
God, yes. Because they opened a case up on me. I hadn't had, when I petitioned the court, I had 4 years clean, or I don't know if I had quite 4 years clean when I first petitioned them. I got them back when I had 4 years clean. But they interviewed my boss. They interviewed for what kind of person I was. They came out and they did a site. They came out and inspected this house to see if it would be enough for 4 kids, or 3 kids. 4 kids. No. Yeah, she played a role in me getting my kids back.
Is that something she did for others?
Oh, God, yes. She worked really hard with trying to reunite families and trying to keep people together. And like I said, Carole was way ahead of her time. The staff she hired was so... She had a methadone counselor that worked there. She had 2 mental health counselors that worked there full time. And then I think there was maybe 1 or 2 that were like doing maybe practicum students. Then she had case managers. She had people from a variety of backgrounds all working together. She had people in recovery, people not in recovery, that weren't, not that they weren't in recovery, but that they weren't addicts or alcoholics. And she did a really good job. She had a really intuitive sense of who was a really good employee. And she had an incredible staff, I believe, that were really passionate about helping women. We really worked our butts off to help women. And it was really, she just didn't, she didn't know how to let go. She probably let Mac do, but Mac was kind of very impersonal. Mac had been put in our New Beginnings. Now this is my recollection, that she'd been put in there for murder, for killing her husband. But it was deemed a domestic violence situation, and she never really got close to anybody but Carole, and so she was always there. Whatever Carole needed, she would do stuff for Carole. I think she was so grateful with Carole for getting her out of having to go to prison. So
you guys were all, there was this, familial, feeling. Did you guys, with her kind of as like this mother figure, did you know her family or stories of her family?
I heard stories of her family, the alcoholics, and well, that's what I heard. And stories of her being, a classical pianist, and she would play. That's when you knew Carole was in a really good mood. She'd break out, start playing. There was a piano there. She would play the piano at all these functions and stuff, and everybody kind of waited for it. But yeah, we would hear little bits, snippets of things, but not everything.
She didn't put her life as an open book before you. Not
a lot, pieces of it. It was more like if you got into a situation, she would recall something from her past. If it was targeted information, she would give you for a specific thing. Yes, this is, oh yeah.
So what would you say, is more on the fun side of things, like what would you say most surprised you about Carole that you learned?
About Carole? I think there was something about her being, what did she open for somebody? I mean, she was really good pianist. I didn't know. I mean, I knew she could play the piano and stuff. I didn't know that she had been like a protege and all that stuff. I didn't really know. I mean, people talked about it, but I don't really believe. There's some stuff I heard at her funeral, at her memorial, that I didn't really think about. So, yeah.
What struck you about her memorial?
There weren't very many people. It was a very small room. But there were quite a few judges in the room. I did recognize them from my time, and Janice was there, and there weren't enough people. I don't think it was well publicized, her death, because there were people, when I told them that she had passed, they didn't even know it. So I don't think there's not a real good way to. I mean, to me, Steve Dunn should have done something in the Oregonian. I mean, it should have been on the nightly news. It should have been big, because she had a profound impact on a lot of women's lives, and so it was small. I thought it was small. She touched a lot of people's lives, so it should have been big.
Well, I'm curious, like, going back to 87, and then it took a couple of years before you actually were working there. Did you stay in contact and think about Carole?
Oh, yeah, I was there all the time.
Oh,
I go, because, I'd go up, I don't know how often. I want to say once a week. It might have been more, it might have been less, depending on what I was going through. But yeah, I would go up there. Plus, whenever I'd have a friend or something that was struggling, I'd take them down to Carole, help. What? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
I wasn't the only one that did that. So.
Yeah, I guess I was more curious in the sense of, was she a person that was a physical presence in your life from the moment you met her in some capacity until when she died? Or
I think I kind of am fuzzy on the years I was using, but she must have been, because I knew exactly where her house was. I knew exactly what her phone number was. I knew all that stuff, and I'm not quite sure how I knew it all, but because like I said, it was a little fuzzy. But yeah, she was a presence.
Perfect lead-in. I was using just like basically adjectives. How would you describe Carole? What were the words you would use to describe her?
Wow, powerful. Compassionate. She was a woman of her convictions. I mean, she would fight. She was a fighter. She would fight for things she believed in really hard. And she made a lot of difference. So she was a mover and a shaker. And she did not sit back and like quietly wait for things. She would take people, she would make commitments to be there for people. There were people back when AIDS was really, when we weren't talking about people living with AIDS. We were talking about people, it was a death sentence. And she would be there for people. And there was one person, I can't even remember, that she really wanted to not have die in prison. That she really fought to try to have her in her house so that she could die not in prison. And there were women in the house that had AIDS. So she really fought for women to have a humanizing life experience and death experience, and she would support them to the end, to the very end. So,
for someone that's strong, and something you had said earlier, and something I've heard before from other people, is that she didn't seem to be super talented with self-care.
She was horrible. She wasn't. Yeah, she was horrible. She was horrible. I don't even know. I'm trying to think of something we did that was nice for her to make her do some self-care. She had her birds. That was kind of her self-care. She liked her. She had a parrot and a macaw, military macaw. So that was. She had her fish. She loved fish. She had a huge aquarium in her houseboat, and she had aquariums at Early Beginnings too. So there were things she liked. She liked playing the piano, but I don't know that she. I think at one point she did go to therapy for a while. I think she talked to me about that, about going to see somebody, because she was really struggling with some stuff. But it was a hard sell. And if you did it with Carole, you'd have to like be really hard. You'd have to be ready to go through the wall to address her self-care stuff. You could do it, but you really would have to, like, it was going to be a battle, because she really viewed everybody else's issues as more important than her own a lot of times. So
it would be hard to tell her that taking care of herself would help the whole.
I know. You should want to hear it. So.
Do you think that there's still a need, well, let me first ask, for the populations you work with, is it both male and female?
Right now, yes.
Specifically speaking of women, since I didn't know about Mitch, so.
Mitch is the one. You ask anybody that was connected with, most people knew Mitch, because he was like, he was always doing like yard work or something. She would give him little jobs. I mean, he was a quirky guy. He did scrap and stuff like that. His mental health precluded him from. He was bipolar, and not on meds usually, and his mental health would keep him from like working too many mainstream jobs. He'd maybe get little contract jobs or do some stuff, or he would work on stuff for Carole or something, but yeah.
But other than that one man, she did her whole thing was for women.
Yeah.
Do you still think that there is a need today for an institution, organization like Our New Beginnings?
Oh God, yes. We've lost all our women's services. I mean, we used to have transition services for women. We used to have CPA, prostitution alternatives. We used to have Our New Beginnings. There was a lot of programming for women. There isn't anymore. I mean, really, a lot of it's lost.
Just because of cuts?
Because of cuts, because I'm not sure why. You know, when I got hired at the jail intervention program, it was a grant program, and one of the reasons we got funded, one of the stats they said was we were #1 in the nation with drug-related crimes for women. #1. That was back in '94. So that was percentage-wise. But when you work for the system, there aren't very many women. They get kind of lost in the system, I think, sometimes. There's more services for men. Didn't used to be like that.
But you see the need with your own...
The women come in. Usually the women that come in are... they're multifaceted. Their needs are multifaceted. They're hard work. Most people would rather work with 3 or 4 men than get one woman on their caseload because they tend to have issues, mental health issues, trauma issues, maybe children issues, relationship issues, drug and alcohol issues, mental health. I mean, you're going on and on and on, and so it's a lot. It's a lot to try to deal with and try to find services for, and there aren't very many services out there for women like there used to be. Used to be able to get, Carole Pope used to be able to get women in her program on the same day. You can't do that anymore with any program. If I'm trying to get a person in residential treatment, they might have to wait 6 or 8 weeks to get into residential. What do I do in the meantime? You know, I mean, what do you do?
Are these people who are actually...
in the system. And they're better off than the ones that aren't in the system. When I was in the jail, when we had Oregon Health Plan, treatment centers were so full that sometimes people would wait in jail 8 or 9 months before a bed would become available for us to be able to get them in a treatment center. Not always. Depended on the treatment center. Some were quicker. But, yeah.
So there's a need. There's a need for this kind of modern day Our New Beginnings. From your purview of what you do now, do you think there's the possibility for it still, for it existing?
I think that people would have to look at how they determine who gets services within the system. I think that the current way they evaluate, only highs and very highs, only those with the risk factor high and very high in community justice qualify for being funded for services. So, for instance, if I had somebody that was a low risk to reoffend, I couldn't help them. So Carole didn't do that. She took anybody that was willing to change. It could be your first offense, it could be your 50th offense. She would take them and try to help them if they were ready. So she went more on level of change rather than how high of risk factor they were too. But because of the way the funding is nowadays, they tend to only want to address the really high risk for recidivism people, which leaves a lot of people kind of out in the cold.
I had a statistic from Carole Pope's actual oral history, where she had said that, like you had basically alluded to the same thing. She said that there was a 84 to 90% success rate, 84 to 90% success rate.
Wow.
Your time as a case manager, did you see that?
I think it was dependent, and I think, now when you say success rate, now remember this with Carole, is like, people would fuck up. That doesn't mean they wouldn't get it eventually, you know. So one thing, I saw people be successful. I saw that it worked. But the thing, Carole used to say her dream was that someday she wanted to like have a farm out in the country that was self-sustaining, where women could come and they could live there, and they could live there as long as they wanted to or needed to, and they could leave when they wanted to leave, and then if they needed to come back, they could come back, but that there would be jobs there and stuff where they could make a living, you know, like honey making, you know, or making quilts or breaking horses or whatever. And she really saw a need for that. She saw some women as needing the ability to come back and get support over and over and over again. That they would able... I know that when I worked at Project Network, all my work was overseen by a psychiatrist. And one of the things she used to say to me was that that one of the indicators somebody had mental health issues was when they didn't stay clean longer than about 9 months, 6 to 9 months, and then they'd relapse, and then they'd stay clean for 6 to 9 months, and they'd relapse. They said it was she said that was an indicator for mental health issues. And I think Carole recognized that some people were so traumatized in their lives and had such horrific life experience that sometimes they'd get clean for a while and stuff would start getting really real and they couldn't really handle it and they needed to escape. And she had the ability to let them come escape to her place. And so I think that that's something that we don't have anymore. So we don't have very much mental health stuff anymore either. So, yeah.
Only a few more questions.
No problem.
You got to be there towards the end. When you were doing case management, were you also involved? Like, did you know the greater structure of how she was getting funding and, you know, contracts she was picking up with the Department of Corrections? Like, were you part of that?
Oh, yeah.
So I know from her oral history, she basically, for lack of better terms, blames the contract she got with the Department of Corrections for work release. And
yeah, back then it was different because it was state and county. So back then, misdemeanors were supervised by the county, and felonies were supervised by the state. So they had parole and probation. And so it was 2 entities. So she was a jail alternative for probation for a long time. And so she was getting funding for that. They would call her and say, hey, I've got somebody that I'd like to place in your program in lieu of jail time. So we would have to call. If one of those people would come into our program from the county jail, we would have to call within X amount of time if they walked away from the program because it was considered an escape. So Carole got this idea that she wanted to do that. She wanted to do trans leave for people coming out of prison, for women coming out of prison. So she met with the state, and they came in and they inspected the house, and there was a lot of stuff. The alarm system, I don't remember all of it, but it was expensive. She had to finance the house, which the house had been given to her, so there wasn't money owed on the house. Because Fred Byers had given her the house for the program. And so she refinanced the house to be able to accommodate felons, basically, coming out of prison. And we only got one woman who transitioned out, and then they cut the contract. One woman. So I want to say, I don't remember how much it was. It was a lot of money. I don't remember if it was $50,000, $150,000, whatever it was a lot of money for that time. And that was the most catastrophic of the final situation. That's what she said brought her down. I'm not sure. I think she could have weathered it, but I think she was really tired. And I think she was exhausted, and I think she would have needed to get support from other people. And I feel like her board was waiting for her to show that, and she didn't show that. I think it was really her decision to close. I think she was tired. So,
you just mentioned the board. Is like, were you?
It's a hell of a board. I mean, Arlene Schnitzer. They had all these politicians on this board. You know, I met so many political people. They were all on her board, judges, and Arlene Schnitzer was the biggest one that used to come to function. She'd come to the Christmas parties and stuff like that. And who was the judge? There was a lot of judges on her board. But anyway, she... I think she just kind of gave in to the board, you know, that she just, I think they were looking to her. I think everybody, Carole had the most power of all of them, more than the judges, more than any of them. And she used to, well, that's probably another story, but she used to get into it with Joanne Fuller. You know who Joanne Fuller is? Joanne Fuller is now the head of, is it Human Services? Used to be the head of Corrections. But back then, she was the head of Women's Transition Services and had a lot to do with the Council for Prostitution Alternatives and stuff. So they would war back and forth about money and stuff. So I think Carole just got tired. And I don't think she, I don't, Ruby, leave her alone, honey. Ruby, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
She's like had it. She's been very good for all this time, and that's.
We're almost done, Ruby.
She said, "I'm not used to this. I'm used to being pampered." So anyway, yeah.
You think it was her decision?
I think it was more Carole's decision than Carole would admit. I think that Carole. I think there were ways that Carole could have pulled it out. I just don't think she had the discipline to do it, and I think that Carole. I think the board kind of let her run carte blanche for too long. I think they should have held her accountable a little bit. I think they should have kept her on a little shorter leash.
After it did close, you moved on before it closed, but not
very
terribly
much.
before.
No,
yeah.
Like 6 months.
And I know that you had mentioned that she was, peeved with you.
Yeah, she was pissed, really pissed.
But then
she felt betrayed. She felt betrayed that she had, because she literally saved my life, and then I wasn't there. But I had kids I was raising. I couldn't. I needed a paycheck. I loved her, but I needed money. I needed to support my children. So.
Do your children have any memories of her? Do they?
I don't know that they do. They were pretty young, and I didn't bring them around. I didn't get them back till I had 4 years clean, and I want to say that was right when things were falling apart at our New Beginnings. I would take them up there sometimes, but they were little kids, and I don't think they really knew what it was up there. I didn't take them up there much. So
when you were living the moments at our New Beginnings, first as a client, then as a case manager, did you actively know that, like, did you characterize her as your mentor?
I knew she was my mentor. I don't know that I called her my mentor or anything, but I knew that Carole let people know that if she could make it out of the system, you could make it out of the system. And so that really struck me, and she really let me know that that it made a difference to her whether I made it or not. So that was important to me. So I don't know if that's mentoring or big sister. I don't know what it is, but she mentored me. I don't know if I recognized it back then. I knew she saved my life. So I think it was bigger than just a mentor to me back then. I think she was God. Pretty much. So
I was going to ask you, like, was her past used? Like, she talked about being in prison a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then, did you know much about her? Did people, I should say, like whether workers or clients, did they know much about her personal life?
You know, there was always rumors and innuendo about her personal life. I don't know that we knew a lot about it. I knew who her PO was. I knew Kim Johnson was her PO. I knew that Janice was her partner. There was a lot of rumors about her. Because her boundaries were so bad, she opened herself up for people speculating on who she had affairs with. My opinion is, I think a lot of that was homophobia. My personal impression of that. That's not to say if a woman showed up at Carole's house that she wouldn't take her in and let her spend the night. So, you know, I mean, she kind of opened herself up for that. But I didn't have any firsthand knowledge of her breaking boundaries in that particular fashion. So there you have it.
It's a good point, though. I mean, we're talking about, you know, for easy math, mainly the '80s, and homosexuality was viewed differently than it was today. Was it a thing at?
Well, people were always saying Carole was having affairs with her clients. They were always saying that, and I'm not sure that they would have said that if she was a man running a program for women. I don't know. Maybe they would have. Maybe people are looking for. Maybe if a man was having women come over and spend the night and stuff, but I just think it was wild speculation. I think there was a lot of innuendo about that. People always are saying, well, she had really bad boundaries. Well, I'm not going to argue she had bad boundaries. I'm the first one to say she had bad boundaries. I am also the first one to say I didn't have any awareness of her having an affair. She was with Janice. I mean, that's it.
These people talking, is it people outside of Our New Beginnings trying to discredit our new, or
or jealous girls that would go, oh, she's a favorite. You must be sleeping with her. You know, like that, kind of like that. So I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg, but it was there.
Were there some great? I'm just trying to imagine a house full of people that
wounded people.
Gives a lot of trauma.
A lot of trauma
coming together. Must make for some sparks here and there.
Oh, God, yes. Sparks. I remember one girl, one of the women who I suggested, put her arm through a window at Our New Beginnings. Because anger, that's how trauma tends to show its little face when you first start addressing it. It tends to be rage. And so, yeah, let's get them all together in a house together and then throw in some kids. And so... yeah, it could be pretty lively around there. But, you know, most of the time it was pretty wonderful. Most of the time it was pretty wonderful. And I'm looking at this little dog and I'm remembering one of the women had a little dog that was in New Beginnings.
Women, children, dogs.
Yeah,
fish.
She let her have a little dog. I just thought Mary Lou had a little mongrel in her house. And Carole let that happen. Like I said, Carole was ahead of her time. She knew about the therapy of pets. She knew about building relationships. She knew about methadone was never her first choice, but she probably accepted it quicker than others in the field. And so it was an option. It was never her first option. But
methadone?
Yeah. But she would help some women get on methadone as a life-saving thing. And back then, there weren't a lot of programs that would do that. They were like, oh, no.
So, final question. Do you have any final comments, memories, anecdotes that you want to share about Carole, Our New Beginnings? Anything you want to say?
Wow. That's so big. I just get this whole bunch of memories, coming at me all at once with that. I'm trying to think of. I don't know. I'll probably think of 100 of them after you leave here. I don't really think so. But I do know that I wouldn't be where I am or who I am without her. And I do know that she didn't get there by being quiet. And when you're not quiet and you have a voice, you open yourself up to very close scrutiny. And she did pretty well with it most of the time. She usually landed on her feet. I think she just got really tired. But she was amazing. And I'm really glad. I'm really sad that there isn't a place like that now here. I think Lori's working on doing something like that. And bravo, she needs to. Because women need it. Women are kind of lost in the system now, I think. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you.